The scream of metal against metal echoed through the junkyard as Marcus Chen dragged another twisted beam toward the sorting pile. Sweat dripped from his forehead despite the cool morning air of New Meridian, the colony world that had become his prison as much as his home. 3 years since the accident. 3 years since he'd lost Sarah and Emma in the transport crash. 3 years of exile in this graveyard of broken dreams and discarded machines. He paused, wiping his hands on his worn coveralls, and gazed across the endless expanse of rusted hulks and shattered dreams. The junkyard stretched for kilometers in every direction, a monument to humanity's waste and the Veltar's discarded technology. Most humans avoided this place, but Marcus found peace among the wreckage. Here, everything was already broken. Nothing left to lose. The sound that stopped him wasn't mechanical. It was organic, desperate, barely audible above the wind whistling through the metal maze. A whimper. Human? No, the pitch was wrong, too melodic despite the pain. Marcus had heard enough Veltar voices in the settlement to recognize the species' distinctive tonal quality. He followed the sound deeper into the yard, past towers of collapsed starship hulls and pyramids of spent energy cores. The morning sun cast long shadows between the debris, creating a landscape of light and darkness that seemed to shift with each step. The whimpering grew stronger, more desperate. Behind a massive pile of corroded atmospheric processors, Marcus found her. The Veltar woman lay crumpled against a discarded landing strut, her iridescent blue skin pale and mottled with exhaustion. Her people were known for their ethereal beauty, long, graceful limbs, faces that seemed carved from precious stone, hair that moved like liquid starlight. But this woman was different. Her legs lay at unnatural angles, clearly useless. Deep cuts marked her arms where she dragged herself across the sharp metal debris. Most shocking of all were the ritual scars across her forehead, fresh cuts that spelled out Velnath in her people's script, the word for broken one, the mark of the abandoned. Her large violet eyes fixed on Marcus with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. She said something in her native tongue, the words flowing like music despite her obvious pain. When he didn't respond, she switched to accented standard. "Please," she whispered, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. "I do not wish to die alone." Marcus knelt beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly. He'd had minimal contact with the Veltar during his time on New Meridian. They kept to their own sectors of the colony, their own culture, their own problems. But the look in her eyes, he'd seen it before, in his own reflection after the accident. The look of someone who had lost everything. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. She tried to sit up straighter, but winced in pain. "Mining accident. The quantum drill collapse. My spine." She gestured weakly at her legs. "My family brought me here 3 days ago. Veltar do not keep the broken." The casual way she said it hit Marcus like a physical blow. They dumped her here to die because she was paralyzed. Left their own daughter in a junkyard like a piece of broken equipment. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zara." The name carried a musical quality even spoken through exhaustion. "You are human. Why do you not leave me as well?" Marcus studied her face, seeing past the alien features to something fundamentally universal: suffering, abandonment, the desperate desire to live. "Because someone should have saved my family 3 years ago. Someone should have tried harder." He slipped his arms under her, surprised by how light she felt despite her height. Veltar bones were hollow, like birds, he remembered from the settlement briefings. She tensed as he lifted her, clearly expecting more pain or betrayal. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "My workshop. It's not much, but it's clean and warm." Marcus began the careful journey back through the maze of debris. "We need to get you medical attention. No human doctor will treat me. And Veltar physicians," she laughed bitterly, "they believe I should be allowed to die with dignity. Then we'll figure something else out." Marcus felt her weight against his chest, heard the rapid flutter of her breathing. "I won't let you die in a junkyard, Zara." As they moved through the shadows and scattered light of the wreckage field, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. He'd spent 3 years hiding from the world, accepting that some things couldn't be fixed, some losses couldn't be overcome. But holding this broken alien woman in his arms, seeing the flicker of hope returning to her violet eyes, he felt something he thought was dead forever. The desire to save someone. The belief that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth fighting for. Marcus's workshop occupied a converted shipping container at the edge of the junkyard, solar panels cobbled from salvaged parts providing power to basic life support and his repair equipment. It wasn't much. A cot, a small kitchen unit, workbenches covered with electronic components. But it was home. More importantly, it was private. He set Zara down gently on his cot, the thin mattress creaking under her weight. In the better light, he could see the full extent of her condition. The ritual scarring on her forehead was infected, the cuts deeper than he'd first realized. Her people had marked her for death with deliberate cruelty. But it was her legs that made his chest tighten with rage, clearly shattered in multiple places, the bones set wrong or not at all. "How long since the accident?" he asked, pulling his medical kit from a storage locker. 14 days. Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. "They kept me in the medical facility until the healers declared me permanently damaged. Then the family council met." Marcus had heard about Velter family councils from other colonists. Their society was built around collective decision-making, but apparently that included deciding who lived and who died. "They voted to abandon you." Unanimously. She turned her face toward the wall. "Even my mother cast the stone of severance." The medical scanner in Marcus's kit was human technology, but biological readings were universal enough. What he saw made his stomach drop. Severe spinal compression at the 3rd and 4th lumbar vertebrae. Complete severing of nerve pathways to her lower extremities. By human standards, she was permanently paralyzed from the waist down. But the scanner picked up something else. Cellular regeneration activity that shouldn't exist in a 2-week-old injury. Veltar biology was different from human, more adaptive. Given the right conditions, the right treatment. "Zara, I need to ask you something important. Has anyone told you that your condition is absolutely permanent?" She looked at him with confusion. "Of course. The healers were very clear. My spine is severed. I will never walk again." Marcus pulled up the scanner readings on his workstation display. "Look at this. These cellular activity patterns, they indicate ongoing healing attempts. Your body is trying to repair itself." Zara struggled to sit up, staring at the readouts she couldn't fully understand. "That is impossible. Veltar do not recover from spinal severance. Maybe because no one ever gives them the chance." Marcus felt excitement building despite the desperate circumstances. "Your people abandon the injured too quickly. But what if there's a window? What if proper treatment in the first few weeks could make a difference?" He began pulling up medical databases on his terminal, cross-referencing Velter physiology with experimental human treatments. The data was limited. The two species rarely shared medical information. But what he found was promising. Veltar neural tissue showed remarkable plasticity compared to human, and their cellular regeneration rates were nearly 3 times higher. "There's a procedure," he said, scanning through research papers. "Microsurgical spinal fusion combined with neural growth stimulation. It's experimental even for humans, but for Veltar biology." "You are not a doctor," Zara said quietly. "No, but I used to be an engineer. Biomedical systems before I came here." Marcus turned to face her, seeing the careful hope she was trying not to show. "I worked on prosthetic neural interfaces, spinal implants. The principles are similar." Zara was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "Why would you risk this? I am not your species. My people would never do the same for a human." Marcus thought about Sarah and Emma, about the rescue teams that had given up too soon, the doctors who had declared them unsavable while their hearts still beat. Because everyone deserves a chance. Because throwing away a life just because it's damaged is wrong, no matter what species does it. He began pulling equipment from storage, surgical tools he'd salvaged over the years, medical scanners, a portable surgical unit he'd been rebuilding as a hobby. None of it was state-of-the-art, but it might be enough. The procedure would be dangerous, he admitted. I'm not a trained surgeon, and we don't have a proper medical facility. If something goes wrong, I'd die, Zara finished. As I will die anyway if we do nothing. She reached out with one slender hand, touching his arm. Her skin was warm, almost electric. At least this way, I die fighting. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief and isolation he carried for 3 years. This alien woman, abandoned by her own people, was showing more courage than he'd managed since the accident. Then we fight, he said. But first, we need to get you stable. Food, water, treatment for those infections. The surgery will have to wait until you're stronger. As he began preparing a nutrient solution compatible with Veltar biology, Marcus caught Zara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something deeper. Something that made his pulse quicken despite the impossible circumstances. Marcus, she said softly. In my language, your name would be Marketh. It means, he who brings light to dark places. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus smiled genuinely. Then let's bring some light to this darkness, Zara. The infection in Zara's ritual scars responded to human antibiotics better than Marcus had hoped. Veltar physiology, it seemed, was remarkably adaptable. Over the next 4 days, he watched color return to her blue skin and strength flow back into her voice. She was a fighter. That much was clear from how quickly she bounced back once given proper care. But it was the conversations during her recovery that truly changed everything. Tell me about your family, Marcus said one evening as he checked her IV lines. The workshop felt different with her presence, warmer, more alive than it had been in years. Zara gazed up at the ceiling, her violet eyes distant. My father was a crystal singer, one who harmonizes the mining equipment with resonance frequencies. My mother studied atmospheric dynamics. They were respected members of the colony council. Her voice carried old pain. They had such hopes for me. What did you want to become? A bridge builder. She smiled sadly. Not literal bridges, cultural ones. I believed humans and Veltar could learn from each other if someone helped translate not just words, but meanings, intentions, dreams. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Past tense. The accident happened during my cultural exchange internship. I was working in the human mining sector, learning your techniques. She turned to look at him directly. The irony is not lost on me that a human is now trying to repair what my own people caused. The weight of that statement settled between them. Marcus had assumed her injury was random, but there was clearly more to the story. What really happened down there, Zara? She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. There was a cave-in. The human crew was trapped. I could have escaped, should have escaped according to Veltar safety protocols. But I stayed to help dig them out. Marcus stopped adjusting her medical equipment. You saved them. 3 humans lived because I delayed my own evacuation. The support beam that crushed my spine fell while I was pulling the last miner to safety. She laughed bitterly. My family was ashamed. Not because I was injured, but because I chose human lives over my own safety. In their minds, I was already broken before the beam fell. The full picture hit Marcus like a physical blow. Zara hadn't just been abandoned because she was paralyzed. She'd been abandoned because she'd shown compassion for humans. Her own people had punished her for the very quality that made her extraordinary. Do those miners know what you sacrificed for them? He asked. I do not know. I never saw them again after the accident. Zara studied his face. Does it matter? They are alive. That is enough. Marcus had to turn away, overwhelmed by emotions he thought were dead. This alien woman had risked everything to save strangers, and her reward had been abandonment by everyone she'd ever loved. Yet she spoke of it without bitterness, as if the choice had been inevitable. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I am broken," she replied, but there was less conviction in her voice than before. "No." Marcus turned back to her, his voice firm. "You're the opposite of broken. You're the strongest person I've ever met." Their eyes met and held, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them. Not just attraction, though he was increasingly aware of her ethereal beauty, but recognition. They were both outcasts, both carrying wounds that went far deeper than the physical. The moment was interrupted by a rumbling sound outside. Marcus grabbed a plasma rifle from his equipment locker and moved the window. A Velter transport was approaching across the junkyard, its sleek organic curves out of place among the angular human wreckage. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Zara, but he could see the fear in her eyes. She knew that vehicle. The transport settled outside his workshop with a soft hiss of displacement engines. 3 Veltar emerged, 2 males and a female, all wearing the formal robes of family authority. The female had Zora's bone structure, her liquid starlight hair. Her mother. Human, the female called out in accented standard. "We know she is here. We have come to complete what was left unfinished." Marcus stepped outside, rifle ready, but not raised. The 3 Veltar watched him with expressions of cold disdain. Up close, he could see the family resemblance. All 3 shared Zora's elegant features, but none had her warmth or humanity. "She doesn't want to see you," Marcus said. "What she wants is irrelevant," one of the males replied. "She bears the mark of severance. Her existence brings shame to our lineage." The mother stepped forward, and Marcus saw something that chilled him. Not cruelty, but complete emotional emptiness. "You do not understand our ways, human. Zara died the day she chose your species over her own safety. What lies in your shelter is merely an echo that must be silenced. Over my dead body. If necessary." The mother's voice carried no emotion at all. "Stand aside, or we will remove you." Behind him, Marcus heard the soft hum of his workshop door opening. Zara appeared in the doorway, supported by the frame but standing on her own feet. The neural stimulation treatments were working faster than he dared hope. "Mother," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "I am not dead, and I am no longer broken." The shock on the 3 Veltar faces was worth every risk Marcus had taken. But he could see it wouldn't be enough to change their minds. In their eyes, Zara's recovery only made her defiance worse. The real fight was just beginning. The silence stretched like a taut wire between Zara and her family. Marcus watched the 3 Veltar process what they were seeing, their abandoned daughter standing upright, color in her cheeks, defiance blazing in her violet eyes. The mother recovered first, her face hardening into an expression of cold fury. "Impossible," she whispered. "The healers confirmed complete severance. You cannot be standing. Yet here I am." Zara took a careful step forward, her hand still on the doorframe for support, but clearly mobile. "Thanks to the human you came here to threaten." The younger male, Zara's brother, Marcus realized from the family resemblance, stepped toward her with something like wonder. "Zara, if you can truly walk again, if the damage can be healed, then perhaps the family council." "No." The mother's voice cut through his words like a blade. "She was marked for severance. The ritual cannot be undone, regardless of her physical condition." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "You're saying even if she's completely healed, you'll still consider her dead?" The older male, clearly the father, spoke for the first time. "She chose humans over her own people. That choice marked her as corrupted long before the spine was severed. Her recovery only proves she has been further contaminated by human influence. Zara moved another step away from the door, her movements still careful, but growing stronger. I saved lives, Father. Human lives, yes, but lives nonetheless. How is that corruption? Because they are not our lives to save. The mother's voice carried absolute certainty. Veltar preserve Veltar. We do not sacrifice ourselves for aliens, no matter how superficially similar they appear. Marcus had heard enough. Get off my property. Now. The mother turned her attention to him with the sort of look she might give something unpleasant on her shoe. You have delayed the inevitable, human, but you cannot prevent it. Zara must die. If not here, then when she returns to the colony. The mark of severance makes her an outcast among all Veltar. She will be hunted until the shame of her existence is cleansed. Then I won't return to the colony. Everyone turned to look at Zara. She had moved fully away from the door now, standing independently despite the slight tremor in her legs. Her voice carried absolute resolve. I renounce my ties to the Veltar people, she continued. I claim the right of species abandonment under colonial law. I choose to become human. The legal declaration hit like a bomb. Marcus knew the law. Any sentient being could renounce their species' citizenship and apply for adoption by another. It was rarely used, and never between species as different as human and Veltar, but it was legally binding. Zara's father recoiled as if she'd struck him. You cannot. It is impossible. You are Veltar. You will always be Veltar. Biologically, yes, but legally, culturally, emotionally. Zara looked at Marcus, and he saw in her eyes a depth of trust that took his breath away. I choose humanity. I choose the species that judges by actions rather than bloodlines. That saves lives regardless of their origin. The mother's composure finally cracked. You foolish child. You think these humans will truly accept you. You are alien to them. Different. When the novelty wears off, when the differences become too great, they will abandon you just as we have. Maybe, Zara said quietly. But at least they'll abandon me for what I do, not for what I am. Marcus stepped beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell but not touching. The message was clear. Support without control. The Colonial Administration Office is in New Meridian Settlement. We can file the paperwork tomorrow. You would sponsor her application? The mother asked, her voice filled with disbelief. I'd be honored to. The three Veltar exchanged glances, communicating in rapid bursts of their musical language. Finally, the father stepped forward. Very well. If she chooses to become human, she is no longer our concern. But know this, both of you, no Veltar will ever recognize her new status. She will be forever marked as traitor and outcast among her birth species. And you, human, will be marked as well for harboring her. I can live with that, Marcus said. The father's eyes narrowed. Can you? When Veltar merchants refuse to trade with you. When Veltar employers blacklist your name. When the Colonial Council splits along species lines because of your actions. You are choosing to become an enemy of half the colony's population. Marcus felt a moment of uncertainty. He'd been isolated for 3 years, but complete social ostracism was different. Then he looked at Zara, this remarkable woman who'd risked her life for strangers and been thrown away like garbage for it, and his resolve crystallized. Then so be it. The mother shook her head slowly. You will both regret this choice. Love cannot bridge the gap between species human. Biology, culture, fundamental psychology, they are too different. You offer her false hope, and she offers you an impossible dream. Without another word, the three Veltar turned and walked back to their transport. Within moments, they were gone, leaving only the smell of their exotic propulsion system and the weight of their words hanging in the air. Zara swayed slightly, and Marcus caught her arm to steady her. She leaned against him. and he could feel her trembling. Whether from exhaustion or emotion, he couldn't tell. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "Becoming human is a big step. Once we file those papers." "I was already human," she said, looking up at him with those incredible violet eyes. "I just didn't know it until I met you. You showed me what my own people couldn't. That worth isn't measured by perfection, but by the willingness to fight for something greater than yourself." Standing there in the shadow of the junkyard, holding this extraordinary woman who'd chosen him over everything she'd ever known, Marcus felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Not just hope, but purpose. They were both broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. The real test, he knew, was still to come. The Colonial Administration office in New Meridian Settlement buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Humans filing mineral claims, Veltar registering trade agreements, and the constant hum of translation software trying to bridge the gap between two very different ways of thinking. Marcus held Zora's arm as they navigated through the crowd, her steps growing stronger each day, but still uncertain on uneven ground. Administrator Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, looked up from her desk with barely concealed curiosity as they approached. Word traveled fast in a small colony, and the sight of a human supporting a Veltar woman with ritual scarification was bound to generate gossip. "Mr. Chen," she said formally, "how can I help you today?" "We need to file a species renunciation and adoption petition," Marcus replied, helping Zara into the chair across from the administrator's desk. Sarah's eyebrows rose. "That's unusual. Are you certain you understand the implications? Species adoption is irreversible under colonial law. There's no going back once the paperwork is processed." Zara leaned forward, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was doing. "I understand completely. I formally renounce my citizenship with the Veltar Collective and request adoption into human society under Colonial Statute 347B. The administrator's fingers flew over her terminal, pulling up legal documents that clearly hadn't been accessed in years. "This is unprecedented," she muttered. "We've had humans adopt abandoned children from other human settlements, but cross-species adoption. I'll need to consult with the colonial governor." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Is there a problem with the law?" "Not exactly, but Governor Harrison will want to understand the political implications. Relations between human and Veltar communities have been strained lately." Sarah looked between them meaningfully. "Your situation could either help bridge the gap or make things significantly worse." An hour later, they sat in the governor's office overlooking the settlement's central square. Governor Harrison was a weathered woman in her 50s who'd spent decades managing the delicate balance between two species that barely tolerated each other's presence on the same world. "I'll be direct," she said without preamble. "The Veltar Council has already contacted me. They're furious about this situation and are threatening to withdraw from several joint mining operations if I approve your petition." Zara's hands tightened in her lap. "Because I chose to save human lives. Because you're forcing them to confront the contradictions in their own social system." Harrison's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Your people like to see themselves as morally superior, more evolved, more civilized. Having one of their own abandon them for humans challenges that narrative." Marcus leaned forward. "So you're going to deny the petition to keep them happy?" "I didn't say that." Harrison pulled up a data file on her screen. "I've been reviewing the incident reports from your accident, Ms. Zora. 3 miners alive because you stayed behind. 2 of them have families in the settlement. Children who still have fathers because of your choice." She turned the screen so they could see it. Photos of the rescued miners with their families, incident reports detailing Zora's heroic actions, even commendations that had been filed but never processed because the beneficiary was Veltar. "The question isn't whether you deserve human citizenship," Harrison continued. "The question is whether granting it will tear this colony apart." Through the window, Marcus could see crowds gathering in the square below. Word of their petition had spread, and the settlement was choosing sides. Humans clustered on one side, many holding signs supporting Zara's adoption. Veltar gathered on the other, their faces masks of cold disapproval. "It's already tearing apart," Zara said quietly. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to cause this division." "Don't apologize for doing the right thing," Marcus said firmly. "If their society can't handle one person choosing compassion over prejudice, that's their problem." Governor Harrison studied them both carefully. "Mr. Chen, you understand that approving this petition will make you both targets. Not just social outcasts, but potentially in physical danger if extremists on either side decide to take matters into their own hands." Marcus thought about the 3 years he'd spent hiding in the junkyard, avoiding human contact, avoiding life itself. Then he looked at Zara, brilliant, brave, kind beyond measure, and realized he'd already made his choice the moment he'd found her in the wreckage. "We understand. And Ms. Zara, you're absolutely certain about abandoning everything you've ever known. Your culture, your language, your entire identity." Zara was quiet for a moment, watching the crowd below through the window. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute conviction. "My culture abandoned me first. My identity was never about my species, it was about my choices. And my choice is to stand with people who judge by character rather than biology." She turned to Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. "My choice is to build a life with someone who saw worth in broken things." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then I approve the petition. As of today, Zara Neltar becomes Zara Chen, human citizen of New Meridian Colony." She looked at them both seriously. "But I strongly recommend you both lay low for a while. Let the tensions cool down before making any public appearances." As they left the administration office, Marcus noticed how the crowd in the square parted around them, some with curiosity, others with hostility, but all with recognition. They were no longer anonymous. They were a symbol of something larger, whether they wanted to be or not. "So," Marcus said as they walked toward his transport, "any regrets about becoming human?" Zara slipped her hand into his, her touch sending electricity up his arm. "Only that it took me so long to realize where I belonged." The crowd's murmur followed them as they drove back toward the junkyard, but Marcus found he didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, he was looking toward the future instead of drowning in the past. The real test of their choice was just beginning. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the new medical facility he and Zara had built together on the outskirts of New Meridian settlement. Below them, the impossible was happening. Humans and Veltar worked side by side, treating patients from both species with techniques that combined the best of both medical traditions. "The spinal regeneration therapy is working better than we hoped," Zara said, joining him at the window. She moved with fluid grace now, her paralysis completely healed through a combination of human surgical techniques and Veltar cellular regeneration therapy. 3 more patients this week have regained full mobility. Marcus watched a human doctor consulting with a Veltar healer over a shared patient, their different approaches merging into something more powerful than either could achieve alone. "Your bridge-building dream is becoming reality." "Our dream," she corrected, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. The casual intimacy still amazed him. This extraordinary woman had chosen him, chosen to build a life together despite every obstacle their 2 worlds had thrown at them. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. The Veltar Council had indeed withdrawn from several joint projects, creating economic hardship for parts of the colony. There had been protests, both supporting and condemning their relationship. Marcus had lost salvage contracts from Veltar clients, and Zara had been formally declared dead by her birth species. But something unexpected had happened. Other couples, human and Veltar, who had been hiding their relationships, began coming forward. Mixed families that had been living in secret found the courage to be open about their love. The medical facility became a symbol of what cooperation could achieve, and gradually, public opinion began to shift. Dr. Chen called a voice from behind them. Marcus still smiled every time someone used Zora's adopted title. She'd thrown herself into medical studies with the same passion she'd once reserved for bridge building, earning her human medical certification in record time. They turned to see Dr. James Walsh, one of the human miners Zara had saved during the accident. He'd become one of their strongest supporters, helping to fund the medical facility and advocating for human-Veltar cooperation throughout the colony. The latest patient results are remarkable, he continued, handing Zara a datapad. The combination therapy you developed is showing a 93% success rate for spinal injuries. There are colonies requesting information about your techniques. Zara scanned the report, her face lighting up with excitement. James, this means we could help thousands of people across the sector. Both species. It means you're going to be very busy, Marcus said, but he was smiling. Watching Zara discover her calling, not just as a healer, but as a bridge between worlds, filled him with pride beyond words. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on the facility's main communication system. The holographic display activated, showing Governor Harrison's face. Dr. Chen, she said formally, I have news. The Colonial Council has voted to establish New Meridian as the sector's first official human-Veltar integration center. Your medical facility will be expanded into a full research campus with funding from both species' governments. Marcus felt Zara's sharp intake of breath beside him. Official recognition meant everything. Legitimacy, resources, and proof that their impossible dream was becoming reality. There's more, Harrison continued. The Veltar High Council has agreed to lift the cultural ban on cooperation with the facility. They won't apologize for their treatment of Dr. Zara Chen, but they're willing to work with her innovations. After the message ended, Marcus and Zara stood in stunned silence. They'd won. Not just acceptance, but triumph. Their love had literally changed the world. Do you think they'll ever truly accept us? Zara asked quietly. Some will, some won't. But that's their choice to make. Marcus turned to face her fully, still amazed by her beauty, not just physical, but the radiant strength that seemed to emanate from her core. What matters is that we chose each other. Zara reached up to touch the faded scars on her forehead, the marks of abandonment that had become symbols of survival and rebirth. When my family left me in that junkyard, they thought they were throwing away something broken. They couldn't see that broken things can be repaired, can become stronger than they were before. Is that what we are? Marcus asked. Repaired? She smiled, the expression transforming her face into something luminous. We're more than repaired. We're rebuilt. Better, stronger, more beautiful than we ever were apart. As the twin suns of New Meridian set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Two broken people from different worlds, thrown together by chance and bound by choice. They'd faced abandonment, prejudice, and seemingly impossible odds. But love, it turned out, was the most powerful force in the universe. Not the simple emotion poets wrote about, but the complex commitment to choose each other every day, to build something beautiful from broken pieces, to believe in possibilities that others couldn't see. In the distance, their medical facility hummed with activity, humans and Veltar working together, healing wounds that went far deeper than the physical. Children who would grow up in a world where love wasn't limited by species. A future built on the radical idea that what united them was stronger than what divided them. Zara leaned against him, her warmth seeping through his shirt, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that finding her in that junkyard had been the moment his real life began. Everything before had been prologue. Everything after would be their story together. What are you thinking about? She asked softly. Marcus smiled, pulling her closer as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The future. our future, and how sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely places. Like love between a broken human and a discarded alien. Like hope growing in a junkyard, Marcus corrected. Like two people who refuse to let the world define their worth. Like the family we're going to build together. Zara looked up at him with surprise and wonder. Family? If you want that. I know the biology is complicated, and there are medical procedures we'd need to consider, but... She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like starlight and possibility. When they broke apart, her violet eyes were bright with tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Yes to the impossible, beautiful future we're going to build together. As they stood there in the growing darkness, surrounded by the sounds of their thriving medical facility and the distant hum of a colony learning to bridge the gaps between worlds, Marcus Chen and Zara Chen, two souls who had found each other among the wreckage and built something magnificent from broken pieces, knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead. Love, after all, was just the beginning. The graduation ceremony for the new Meridian Integration Academy took place under the open sky, with representatives from 17 different colonies in attendance. Marcus adjusted his formal jacket nervously as he watched the mixed crowd of humans and Veltar taking their seats. Parents, dignitaries, and curious observers who had come to witness what many were calling the future of interspecies cooperation. Stop fidgeting, Zara said beside him, though her own hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She wore traditional Veltar ceremonial robes modified with human elements, a visual representation of the cultural bridge she had become. Our students have worked hard for this moment. The academy had grown from their small medical facility into something neither of them had dared imagine. Now it trained doctors, engineers, teachers, and diplomats in integrated techniques that drew from both human and Veltar knowledge. Their graduates were revolutionizing everything from medicine to architecture across the sector. I still can't believe the Veltar High Council agreed to attend, Marcus murmured, watching the elegant alien dignitaries taking their places in the front row. They had little choice after our graduates began outperforming traditional programs by 40%. Zara replied with satisfaction. Pride has its limits when faced with superior results. The ceremony began with the traditional human march, followed by the Veltar harmony of achievement, two separate traditions that the Academy had learned to blend into something uniquely beautiful. Marcus watched their students process in integrated pairs, humans and Veltar walking together, their differences celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of their first graduates, gave the valedictorian address. She was human, but her research partner and closest friend was Veltar, and their joint thesis on regenerative medicine had already been implemented in 12 colonies. 5 years ago, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the assembly, most people thought the idea of true human Veltar integration was impossible. They said our species were too different, our cultures too incompatible, our biology too distinct. But the founders of this academy proved something revolutionary. That difference isn't division. It's opportunity. Marcus felt Zara's hand slip into his as Sarah continued. Dr. Zara Chen was abandoned by her own people for the crime of caring about human lives. Dr. Marcus Chen was hiding from the world after tragedy convinced him that some things couldn't be fixed. Together, they discovered that the most beautiful solutions come not from choosing sides, but from refusing to accept that sides have to exist at all. The applause was thunderous, and Marcus saw something that would have been impossible 5 years ago. Veltar and humans applauding as one, their enthusiasm genuine and shared. After the ceremony, they hosted a reception in the Academy's central courtyard. The space itself was a testament to integration. Human geometric design blended with Veltar organic architecture, creating something that felt both familiar and wondrously new to members of both species. Dr. Chen called a familiar voice. Marcus turned to see Administrator Sarah Chen approaching with a tall Veltar woman he didn't recognize. I'd like you both to meet Council Member Velora. She has an interesting proposition." The Veltar woman stepped forward with the fluid grace characteristic of her species, but her manner was unusually warm for a government official. "Dr. Chen, I am here representing the Veltar High Council, but I am also here for personal reasons." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "5 years ago, I voted with the council to condemn your actions, Dr. Zara Chen. I believed you had betrayed your species by choosing human lives over Veltar tradition. I was wrong." The admission sent ripples of shock through the nearby crowd. Veltar officials rarely acknowledged error, and never so publicly. "My own daughter was recently injured in a mining accident on Kepler Station," Fellara continued. "The doctors there said she would never walk again. But thanks to the regenerative techniques developed at your academy, she is not only walking, she is running, playing, laughing." Tears, an extremely rare display of emotion for a Veltar, glistened in her large eyes. "You saved my child, both of you. Your research, your refusal to abandon the damaged, your insistence that healing knows no species boundaries." She reached into her robes and withdrew an ornate crystal pendant, a Veltar symbol of highest honor. "The High Council has voted to formally revoke your death marking, Dr. Zara Chen. You are welcomed back among the Veltar people with full honors." Zara stared at the pendant for a long moment, then looked up at Fellara with a gentle smile. "I am honored by the gesture," she said carefully. "But I am no longer Veltar. I am human by choice, and that choice has given me everything I ever dreamed of and more." She gestured to encompass the academy, the mixed crowd, Marcus beside her. "This is my people now. This is my home. This is my family." Fellara nodded with understanding. "Then I offer this instead, an alliance. The High Council wishes to establish similar academies on 4 other worlds, with your guidance and oversight. We want to learn from what you have built here." The implications were staggering. Official Veltar endorsement of integration. Resources and support for expansion. Recognition that their impossible dream had become not just reality, but a model for the future. "We would be honored to help," Marcus said, speaking for both of them. As the reception continued into the evening, Marcus found himself standing on the same observation deck where he and Zara had watched their first successes years ago. The view had changed dramatically. Where once there had been empty land, now sprawling campus buildings house thousands of students, researchers, and faculty from dozens of species. "Regrets?" Zara asked, joining him with 2 glasses of wine. Marcus considered the question seriously. The past 5 years had been challenging beyond imagination. Building the academy had required fighting bureaucracy, overcoming prejudice, and navigating the complex politics of 2 species learning to trust each other. They had faced death threats, funding crises, and moments when failure seemed inevitable. But looking out at the thriving campus, at the mixed groups of students collaborating on projects that would shape the future, at the evidence that love really could change the world, Marcus felt nothing but gratitude. "Only one," he said finally. "I regret that it took me 3 years of hiding in a junkyard to find the courage to care about something again. And I regret that my people had to abandon me before I learned what I was truly capable of," Zara replied. "But perhaps that's the point. Sometimes we have to be broken before we can discover how strong we really are." A group of their students passed below on the walkway, humans and Veltar together, chattering excitedly about their final projects. Among them, Marcus spotted several mixed couples, relationships that would have been scandalous 5 years ago, but were now simply accepted as part of the Academy's diverse community. "They don't see the barriers we had to break down," he observed. "That's the gift we've given them," Zara said. "The right to see possibility where we saw impossibility. The freedom to love without asking permission from their biology." She moved closer to him, and Marcus marveled again at how perfectly she fit against his side, how completely their differences had become complementary strengths. The Kepler station facility will need a director, she said quietly. Someone to oversee the new integration program there. Marcus smiled. Are you asking me to uproot our life here and follow you to the edge of known space? I'm asking if you're ready for our next adventure. Zara looked up at him with eyes that held all the stars in the galaxy. Because I've learned something important over these past 5 years. What's that? Home isn't a place. It's not a species or a culture or a world. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that 5 years of joy and purpose had carved around his eyes. Home is the person who sees your broken pieces and helps you build something beautiful from them. Marcus caught her hand and pressed it to his lips, tasting the salt of tears he didn't realize he was crying. Then, wherever we go, we're already home. As they stood there planning their future, surrounded by the evidence of what two broken people could build when they refused to stay broken, Marcus remembered the day he found Zora abandoned in the junkyard. He'd thought he was saving her life, but the truth was simpler and more profound. They had saved each other. And in doing so, they had saved countless others, the students who would carry their vision to new worlds, the patients who would benefit from integrated medical techniques, the couples who would love freely because Marcus and Zara had proven it was possible. Love, it turned out, was not just personal. It was revolutionary. It was the force that transformed impossible dreams into inevitable realities. And their dream was just beginning. The stars wheeled overhead, alien constellations marking paths to worlds where integration academies would rise, where broken things would be made whole, where the boundaries between species would blur until only the boundary between fear and hope remained. Marcus Chen and Zara Chen, human by choice, united by love, bound by a shared vision of what the universe could become, stood ready to cross that final boundary together. After all, they had become very good at making impossible things happen. The junkyard where it all began was still there, of course, visible in the distance as a reminder of where they had started. But now, it served a different purpose, not as a graveyard for broken dreams, but as a monument to the truth that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings grow from the most unlikely soil. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as loss. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with abandonment. And sometimes, two people who have lost everything can find a way to give the universe everything it never knew it needed. As the twin moons of New Meridian rose over their academy, casting silver light on a future bright with possibility, Marcus and Zara Chen began planning their next impossible dream.